In this part of the presentation, we will demonstrate the capabilities of some of our SAP Read tools. Alright, so let's take a look at some of the SAP Read tools. So this here is Alteryx Designer, and once you've installed the ACS for Alteryx Designer, this folder, this SAP Read Tools folder, will appear on your menu bar, and within that folder you can see here a whole range of different read tools that could be available to you. For our purposes, I'll take a look at the SAP Table Data tool, which is all about extracting data from those SAP tables and views. We'll take a look at the SAP Report tool, which allows you to pull data from SAP Transaction codes, T-Codes, and ABAP reports. We'll take a look at the SAP BW Read tool, which allows us to extract data from BW queries, query views, as well as InfoProviders. We'll also take a look at the SAP Document Read tool, which is a tool used to pull attachments from the master data and transactional data objects within the SAP system. And to finish things off, we'll take a look at the SAP BAPI Read tool, in which case here we're going to use this to extract data via BAPI into Alteryx. So we have a number of workflows I've already laid out here to show you. This is quite a commonly used one. It's a very common use case as well amongst a lot of our users. It's where we want to be able to extract financial data from the underlying SAP system. So in this particular scenario, we're pulling GL accounting data directly from the SAP tables themselves. So there are, as you can imagine, quite a large number of tables associated with financial transactions in an SAP system, but there are two primary tables, two main tables. One of these is a table called BKPF, which is the accounting document header table, and the other one is called BSEG, which is the accounting document segment table. And if we can extract data from both of those tables and join that data together, then effectively we can reconstruct our financial posting documents within Alteryx. So the primary tool of ours that we're using here is the SAP Table Data tool. And if I show you the workflow, how it strings out, get a sense of it, you can see here that we have one of our logon tools. So our logon tool basically stores the information about the SAP system that we want to connect to and passes our credentials through to the other tools in the workflow. Linked to this particular logon tool, I have a table data tool, and this table data tool is going to be extracting data from the BKPF accounting document header table. And I can simply run a search for that particular table, or I can specify the table manually if I know what it is. And we have different features to help you find both the table you're looking for as well as any tables associated with that particular table. So once the table has been selected, we do a direct read of the SAP system and we retrieve all the metadata associated with that particular table into this selection window within the parameters tab. And what we're retrieving here is both a list of all the standard SAP fields associated with that particular table, as well as any custom fields that your company may have defined. And you can see here you've got quite a few fields here. We also have the ability to have the descriptive name as well as the technical name of the field. And what the user simply does is they select the various fields that they're interested in. Okay. We also have the ability to apply filters to that data, so we can really refine the data that's going to be selected. In this scenario here, we've applied just a basic filter on the fiscal year, so we're going to pull data from the selected fields for fiscal year 2019. Okay, so when that particular workflow is run, then we do a direct read of that table and the data is retrieved and pulled into Alteryx. And you can see here I've previously run this particular workflow. Here we can see in the bottom part of the screen here that table output directly. Okay. Then this particular workflow has two branches. The top branch here, what we're doing is we're sending the data extracted from that header level data table, and we're passing it here to this Alteryx join tool. And in the bottom branch is we're using what we call our ACS filter tool and a workflow, and within this workflow is a workflow encapsulated in a macro. So that particular workflow is looking for data from the BSEG table, the item level table, associated with the financial documents. And what we do with this second branch here is we use this thing called our ACS filter tool to drip feed the output we retrieved from this table and pass it into the workflow searching for data from the item level table. So effectively what we're doing is something called a dynamic input. We are using the output from one table as an input into the other table. So when the workflow runs and the output appears at this side of the workflow, we get the data associated with the BSEG table, but it's only that data, the only data we're extracting is the data that's relevant to the inputs provided through this table here. Okay. We then use the Alteryx join tool to make a link between the common keys and both tables. And then if we just move slightly further along, in this, using this Alteryx browse tool here, I can now see the combined result of the header level table and the item level table. So here effectively I have reconstructed that financial document, or those financial documents. And then using these tools here, these are all Alteryx tools, I can work a little bit of magic and just convert the technical names which we extract into the descriptive names to make it a little bit more meaningful to the user. Okay. Now here we're extracting data from financial tables. It doesn't matter whether it's purchasing, sales, materials management, inventory management, it doesn't matter. The essential technique and capabilities are the same. And by using this macro kind of concept within our workflows, by wrapping a workflow into a macro and drip feeding data into it from another component, in this case here our table data tool, we're able to pull massive volumes of data from those SAP systems. So that's one example. Next example is the use of our SAP report tool. Okay, so what we've got here again is a predefined workflow. Transaction MB51 will be familiar to a large number of you. This is an inventory management transaction code which presents a material document list. So let me just firstly show you the output that we get from this. So this is kind of what the output we get. We get the extract from this particular transaction directly presented in a flat tabular format. And if I just flip to my SAP system here, this is, you can see here, transaction MB51, and the output from the standard transaction is basically presented in exactly the same way as we have it here. All right. So what do? So the potential little bit of work you need to do just to tidy up the initial output from SAP transaction code. Unlike tables, transaction codes may have slightly different outputs according to which development team originally produced the transaction many years ago. So here you can see I've specified the particular transaction code I'm interested in. I could also select the report associated with it. So this is the ABAP report associated with that transaction code. When I select the particular transaction code, the system goes away and it retrieves the underlying report name. Now we have one or two choices. Okay, we can either make use of the selection screen that we have represented here. So this is the selection screen, and this is similar to the selection screen you'll see if you were to execute the transaction directly within the SAP environment. Or we can reference a particular transaction variant. Okay, so we can either use a transaction variant or complete our own selection criteria in this particular filter screen here. The other thing we're able to do, and in some scenarios it's quite necessary for us to do, is just to tidy up the data. So maybe we'll have headers with multiple rows, maybe there'll be fields outline, and so we have within the tool itself the ability to define where the header row starts, where we should represent fields other header fields, where we should ignore fields. So we have quite the ability to clean up the data before we actually run the extracts out through into Alteryx. So that's the SAP report tool. Here we have an example of the SAP BW Read Tool. And the SAP BW Read Tool, general principles are the same. Here we're not searching for T-Codes, we're not searching for tables. We have the ability to search for the various queries, info providers that we have available in the system. This is just showing me history here. I can also do basic searches for that particular data, okay, based upon data we have within the particular system. Once you've selected the query, in this case it's the query we've selected here, again that metadata is retrieved from the SAP BW system, and then we see all the characteristics, associated key figures associated with that particular query. The pre-selected fields match to the settings within the BW system. Right, so what's quite nice here is that if there are particular maybe characteristics I don't need to see, or there are characteristics that are missing for my purposes, I can add them here to my output just by selecting them. What we also do is highlight any of the filters and variables that can be populated or may need to be populated by the user before they can successfully execute the report, and these are all color coded. Right, so the green ones here indicate that I've fulfilled the selection criteria that was required by the particular query in order to run it. And then when we execute the query, we have three possible outputs. So the first output from this one here is the data itself. Okay, so we see the various characteristics and key figures associated with that particular SAP BW query. So that's the D output there. The H output is interesting because what we're able to do using the tool is to to extract the hierarchy data associated with the query into Alteryx as well. And what we're also able to do is, if there's maybe multiple different types of hierarchy associated with the query, we can select specifically which of those hierarchies that we'd like to extract. And the hierarchy is always extracted in a flat tabular format. Okay, so nice, easy way to pull that data. And then the middle output here, the T port, allows us to choose which types of text objects associated with the query that we'd like to extract as well. A lot of capability, and if you use BW, this is a really great tool to use. Okay, so the next one on the list I want to show you is one of our other tools. And this is a scenario whereby we want to use our SAP document tool to extract the attachments associated with a given transaction in the system. So this one here, again, this is one of our predefined workflows where we're using our SAP document read tool here. I'm also using our table data tool to select data from the source table where I want to identify whether there is attachments, and then it gets passed through into this particular tool here. And again, using some Alteryx magic, we're able to convert the data extracted from the SAP document read tool into its original format. So what do I mean by that? If we go to my SAP system, and here there's a particular notification, so a plant maintenance transaction in the SAP system, and against this particular transaction there is quite a list of attachments. Okay, zip files, Word files, RTFs, a lot of the MIME types supported by the SAP system. So let's take a look at, say, maybe this one here. Just open it up. Okay, so this is an image file associated with that particular notification transaction, and all the same, I won't open these, but all have their own attachments. So what I'm able to do using the document read tool is I can identify the various notifications. You may recognize this number here from the screen I just shown you. So we're searching for a whole range of notifications to see whether there are attachments associated with them. And then through the execution of the workflow, we identify that there are a number of attachments for that particular transaction in the SAP system. And then we come through our particular tools and we can see that there's the documents associated here. And then finally, as the workflow progresses, we do this write to disk. Now, if I just click on the canvas of my workflow here, because I haven't specifically stored it anywhere, you can see that we have a whole range of files that have extracted as part of this particular workflow. And if I click on the JPG one, that's the file. Right, so using this tool, I'm able to extract those attachments, those documents attached to master data and transactional data objects within the SAP system itself. Really, really handy tool. Okay, and the final one, just to show you, to finish off here, is let's take a look at the BAPI tool being used. This is a very powerful tool. There are a lot of BAPIs available in the standard SAP system, and you may have even defined custom BAPIs or RFC-enabled function modules within your environment. So similar capabilities to other tools that work in similar ways, although the configuration may be slightly different. So this one here, I've run a search for the particular BAPI that I'm interested in. This one is pulling back all the purchase requisition items from the SAP system. Okay, so I'll do a big search for these here. And then we have a couple of things here. So one is often with these BAPIs, we need to provide some kind of input. So that may be a selection criteria. It may just be a flag to indicate we want to extract data. All right. And what we do is, this scenario here, I provided a particular criteria that I want to provide to that BAPI. I've refined this slightly using the selection tool from Alteryx, which means I'm just going to transfer the plant provided by my input file into this particular tool. Okay, so if I click on the input parameters, you can see here that we've done a mapping between the field that we want to provide to this particular BAPI. This is the white one here, and you can see there's a drop-down value against the input field. These other fields are in red. We haven't done any mapping, so we're not interested in those ones. And then in the table, this is kind of where the output will be generated, and the return messages where often we'll get any error messages, those kind of responses from the SAP system. So what we get raw from the SAP system once we execute the BAPI is data that looks a little bit like this. Okay, so it's not quite useful to me yet within an Alteryx environment, and I could use some of the other Alteryx tools to convert this, but what we've actually added already is what we call our SAP BAPI parse tool. And what the BAPI parse tool will do is allow me to identify the output table provided by that particular BAPI, okay, identify the fields that I'd like to have included in my final output. And so basically it just does all the tidying up for us. And then in the browse tool, I can see the full list of outputs from that particular BAPI there.